Hey guys, tonight's story begins far beneath the surface of the ocean, in a place no human being was ever supposed to find. Before we begin though, tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you right now. It's always interesting seeing people from completely different parts of the world here, listening to the same story. And if you end up enjoying tonight's journey, consider liking and subscribing. But only if these kinds of immersive stories truly help you relax and escape for a while. Now then, lower the lights, get comfortable, and let the sound of the deep ocean carry you away, because tonight, we descend into a forgotten world beneath the sea. It began with a warning. The kind people casually laugh about until it is already too late. For years, fishermen living along the coast avoided a certain section of the ocean far beyond the cliffs. Some claimed strange lights could occasionally be seen beneath the water late at night. Others spoke about disappearing equipment, lost divers, voices heard through broken radios. Most people dismissed the stories as superstition, but Elias did not. Perhaps that was because he had always felt drawn toward places other people feared. Or perhaps some part of him had already begun searching for something long before he entered the water that night. The weather had been calm when he began the dive. Above him, the surface shimmered silver beneath the moonlight, while the ocean stretched endlessly into darkness below. At first, everything appeared normal. Rock formations, schools of fish, ancient coral structures resting silently beneath the sea. But the deeper Elias descended, the stranger the ocean began to feel. The water grew unnaturally warm. The sounds around him slowly faded until even the movement of his own breathing seemed distant. And then, he saw it. Far below him, a faint blue light glowing through the darkness. At first, Elias assumed it was some kind of underwater research station. But the deeper he swam toward it, the more impossible the shape became. It did not look mechanical. It looked alive. Soft streams of blue light pulsed beneath the ocean like veins beneath skin. Curved structures emerged from the darkness below, massive and elegant, their surfaces glowing faintly beneath drifting clouds of luminous particles. Elias stopped swimming for a moment. Even through the glass of his mask, his eyes widened in disbelief. There was something down there, something enormous, and then suddenly, his oxygen alarm began screaming. The sound shattered the silence around him instantly. Elias froze. His hand immediately reached for the gauge attached to his suit. Nearly empty. Panic surged through his chest. His breathing became violent almost instantly as he turned upward toward the distant surface far above him. Too far. Far too far. The ocean around him suddenly felt crushing. His movements became desperate now, wild, uncontrolled. Every breath drained what little oxygen remained inside the tank. And then, nothing. The sound stopped. No more oxygen entered his mask. For one horrifying moment, Elias could only hear his own heartbeat hammering violently inside his skull. He tried to swim, tried to scream, but the darkness around him felt heavier with every second. His vision blurred, his body weakened, and just before consciousness disappeared completely, Elias saw something moving toward him through the blue light beneath the ocean. A figure, human, but not entirely. Then everything vanished into darkness. For a long time, Elias could not tell whether his eyes were open or still closed. Everything around him felt distant, heavy, dreamlike. At first, he only became aware of his breathing, slow, uneven. Each breath carried cool, damp air deep into his lungs, and the feeling alone confused him, because the last thing Elias remembered was drowning, the violent panic, the burning pressure inside his chest, the desperate attempt to reach the surface before the darkness swallowed him completely. But now, he could breathe. Slowly, feeling began returning to the rest of his body, the cold moisture against his skin, the faint ache in his chest, the strange softness beneath his back. Elias opened his eyes slightly. Blue light blurred across his vision instantly. For several seconds he simply stared upward in silence, his mind unable to understand what he was seeing. Immense glowing structures stretched high above him into layers of drifting mist, their pale forms pulsing softly with flowing light beneath translucent surfaces. They rose upward in elegant spirals, branching outward into enormous floating shapes that unfolded slowly through the air, like living silk suspended underwater. The entire place moved gently, not through wind, but through slow, invisible currents Elias could somehow feel moving around him. Tiny glowing particles drifted endlessly through the enormous open space, surrounding everything like silent falling stars, and for one dangerous moment, the beauty of the place almost made him forget what had just happened to him, because nothing about it felt possible. It felt too calm, too perfect, too far removed from the terror waiting in his last memory. In another situation, someone might have believed they had died, that this was some strange version of heaven hidden beyond the ocean. But Elias quickly realized something that shattered that comforting illusion almost immediately. His lungs hurt, his throat burned from the salt water he had swallowed, and when he slowly pushed himself upward, pain spread sharply through his shoulders and ribs. No, whatever this place was, he was still alive. That realization sent a quiet unease through him, because if he had survived, then where exactly had he been taken? For several more seconds, Elias remained there, supporting himself weakly against the glowing surface beneath him, while his eyes wandered through the impossible world surrounding him. The strange material beneath his hands bent softly under his weight, like woven fabric layered over water, glowing faintly wherever his fingers touched it. Around him, the enormous luminous structures continued endlessly into the distance, disappearing beneath layers of blue mist so deep he could not see where the place truly ended. Somewhere far above, enormous shadow-like shapes drifted silently beyond the glowing haze, too large to understand clearly, and yet strangely peaceful. Elias stared at them for several seconds before finally noticing something else. Silence, the kind of silence found only in places untouched by the rest of the world for a very long time. No engines, no distant traffic, no machines, only the low echo of flowing water somewhere far away. And the quiet, pulsing hum carried through the glowing forest around him. For reasons Elias could not explain, the place did not feel abandoned. It felt hidden. Elias kept staying on the ground without moving a muscle. Part of him expected the impossible world surrounding him to suddenly disappear like a dream the moment he fully woke up. But it never did. The glowing structures above continued swaying slowly through the blue haze. The drifting particles continued floating silently around him, and somewhere deep within the enormous forest. Deep in the forest, water echoed softly through unseen channels like distant rain inside a cavern. Everything remained real. Carefully, Elias finally forced himself to his feet. Pain immediately spread through his legs and ribs, forcing him to steady himself against one of the towering luminous structures nearby. Up close, it looked even stranger. Its surface was smooth and cool beneath his fingers, almost resembling glass, softened into organic curves by centuries of flowing water. Beneath the translucent outer layer, streams of pale light moved slowly upward through vein-like patterns, hidden inside the structure itself, as though the entire forest carried some kind of silent pulse within it. Elias stared at it for several seconds before slowly stepping away. The deeper he moved into the glowing wilderness, the more impossible details revealed themselves around him. Some of the enormous spiraling structures opened gradually near their base as he approached, unfolding like living flowers before slowly closing again behind him. Elsewhere, transparent streams of water drifted silently through the air itself, suspended within invisible pathways stretching between the towering forms overhead. Inside those floating currents, tiny luminous organisms moved in enormous shimmering groups, changing color whenever they crossed one another. Blue, silver, soft violet. The colors reflected across Elias's face while he walked silently beneath them. At one point, he passed something that vaguely resembled a tree from his world, if trees had been imagined by an ocean instead of land. Its trunk divided into hundreds of floating strands that drifted weightlessly through the air, each one carrying glowing droplets that rose slowly upward instead of falling down. The entire place felt untouched by normal rules. And strangely, the longer Elias wandered through it, the more the fear inside him began giving way to something else. Wonder. Because every direction he looked revealed something beautiful, enough to make him forget his confusion. Then suddenly, Elias stopped walking. Ahead of him, partially hidden behind drifting blue mist, stood a structure unlike anything else he had seen so far. At first glance, it almost resembled a doorway. Immense curved walls rose upward from the glowing ground in smooth flowing arcs, meeting high above him beneath layers of shimmering translucent material. Soft blue light pulsed beneath its surface like slow breathing, and beyond the opening, Elias could see even more light somewhere deeper inside. For a moment, hesitation returned to him, because until now, this place had felt empty, but this structure felt inhabited. The realization sent a quiet tension through his chest, and yet, despite every instinct telling him to remain cautious, Elias slowly stepped forward toward the glowing entrance anyway. As Elias passed beneath the enormous curved entrance, the air around him changed. It became warmer, not uncomfortably warm, but gentle, almost comforting. The glowing mist surrounding the forest slowly began thinning as he moved deeper inside, revealing enormous open spaces hidden beyond the towering structures outside. And for the second time since waking in this impossible place, Elias completely stopped walking, because beyond the entrance, an entire world existed. Far below him stretched vast, flowing pathways illuminated by rivers of soft blue light moving beneath transparent surfaces. Massive structures rose upward in every direction, their shapes curved and fluid as though they had been grown rather than built. Some resembled enormous shells partially open toward the glowing sky above. Others floated silently above the ground itself, connected by drifting bridges formed from translucent material that shimmered softly whenever light touched them. Everywhere he looked, water moved through the city in impossible ways. Thin streams flowed upward between buildings before vanishing into floating spheres suspended high overhead. Elsewhere, enormous curtains of liquid drifted slowly through open spaces without ever falling, carrying glowing organisms through the air like living lanterns. The city felt alive, not through noise or movement, but through rhythm. Everything pulsed softly together beneath the blue light surrounding it. And yet, despite the enormity of the place, there was still almost no sound, no crowds, no machines, no voices echoing through the structures, only distant flowing water, and the low resonant hum Elias had been hearing since he first woke up. The silence should have felt empty. Instead, it felt peaceful, as though this hidden civilization had long ago learned how to exist without disturbing the world around it. Slowly, Elias descended one of the curved pathways leading deeper into the city. The material beneath his feet glowed faintly with each step he took before fading again behind him. And the deeper he walked, the more details began revealing themselves around him. Strange symbols flowed across the walls of nearby structures in soft, moving patterns, almost resembling written language made from light itself. Large transparent chambers embedded within some buildings contained drifting plant-like organisms, unlike anything Elias had ever seen before. Their bodies unfolding slowly through glowing water like living silk. Even the air carried unfamiliar scents. Clean, cold, oceanic. But beneath it all lingered something else Elias could not fully describe. A feeling. Presence. As though unseen eyes followed him quietly from somewhere deeper within the city. Then suddenly, movement. Far ahead, near the edge of one of the glowing pathways, someone stood watching him. Elias froze instantly. The figure remained completely still beneath the soft blue light surrounding the city. At first glance, she almost looked human. Long pale hair drifted gently behind her in the slow currents moving through the air. Her body was slender, graceful, covered in flowing layers of translucent fabric that shimmered faintly whenever she moved. But then Elias noticed the differences. Her eyes were larger than any human eyes should have been, dark and reflective beneath the glowing light around her. Faint luminous patterns moved slowly beneath the pale skin of her neck and arms, like soft currents flowing beneath water. And when she tilted her head slightly while observing him, Elias noticed the delicate translucent webbing extending subtly between her fingers. Neither of them moved, neither spoke. They simply stared at one another in silence, two people from completely different worlds, meeting at the edge of the unknown. The strange girl continued watching Elias with the same quietness, her dark, reflective eyes studying him with open curiosity rather than fear. And somehow, that made the moment feel even more unreal. Because after everything that had happened, the drowning, the impossible forest, the hidden city beneath the ocean, some part of Elias had expected the beings living here to feel frightening. But she did not. Strange, yes? Beautiful in a way he could not fully explain, but not frightening. Slowly, Elias took a careful step forward. The glowing pathway beneath his feet illuminated softly. The girl immediately tensed. Not aggressively, more like an animal uncertain whether to flee. Elias quickly stopped moving. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice sounding strangely loud within the silence surrounding them. The girl did not respond. Her expression remained calm, though Elias noticed a slight movement in her eyes as she listened carefully to the unfamiliar sounds leaving his mouth. For a moment, neither of them spoke again. Then slowly, the girl answered him. The sound of her voice startled Elias instantly, not because it was threatening, but because the language itself sounded unlike anything he had ever heard before. Soft flowing syllables moved together almost musically, rising and falling with strange fluid rhythms that barely resembled spoken words at all. Elias understood nothing. Still, the tone itself felt gentle, careful. The girl spoke again, slightly slower this time, while watching his reaction closely. Elias shook his head quietly. "I don't understand you." Again. The girl remained silent for a moment, then something unexpected happened. Very slowly. She pointed toward herself. "Ale." The word was soft, breath-like. A name. Elias blinked in surprise before slowly placing a hand against his own chest. "Elias." The girl watched him carefully, then repeated it. "Eli, as." The unfamiliar pronunciation sounded strange coming from her voice, yet hearing his own name spoken inside this impossible city sent an odd feeling through his chest. For the first time since waking here, the world around him felt slightly less unreal. Elle tilted her head slightly again while continuing to study him. Up close, Elias noticed even more subtle differences in her appearance. Her skin carried faint traces of shifting blue light beneath it whenever she moved beneath the city's glow. Tiny, almost invisible markings flowed outward from beneath her eyes toward her temples in delicate patterns resembling currents in water. Even her movements felt different from normal human movement, smoother and quieter, as though her body had evolved within a world untouched by gravity for far too long. And yet, despite all those differences, there was still unmistakable emotion in her eyes. Curiosity, caution, wonder, the same emotions Elias himself was feeling. For a few awkward moments, they simply stood there attempting small gestures and broken sounds, neither fully understanding the other. And strangely, that inability to communicate made the moment feel even more human, because despite the impossible world surrounding them, despite the ocean resting somewhere high above the city, two strangers were still trying to understand one another. Then suddenly, Elle looked behind her. The subtle change in her expression immediately caught Elias's attention. For the first time since meeting her, she seemed nervous. Without warning, she stepped closer to him and gently grabbed his wrist. Her hand felt cool against his skin. Before Elias could react, she softly pulled him toward the glowing structures deeper within the city, as though something was coming. Elias stumbled slightly as Ale guided him forward through the glowing pathways of the city. Her movements were quick now, not panicked, but urgent. Every few seconds, she glanced behind them toward the distant entrance Elias had crossed earlier, her reflective eyes narrowing slightly as though listening for something far away. The deeper they moved into the city, the more alive the hidden world around them began to feel. Shapes moved behind translucent walls inside nearby structures, soft silhouettes crossing slowly through illuminated chambers filled with drifting water and glowing organisms. Elsewhere, faint voices echoed briefly through the air before fading again into the city's endless calm. Elias caught glimpses of others watching him from the distance. Some stood silently along elevated pathways overhead. Others observed him. From behind, flowing curtains of luminous liquid suspended between buildings, and every single one of them paused when they saw him. A surface human, an outsider. For the first time since entering the city, Elias truly understood how impossible his presence here must have seemed to them. The feeling sent a quiet tension through his chest. But strangely, he did not sense hostility in their eyes, only confusion, curiosity, almost the same cautious fascination he himself felt toward them. Ale continued leading him deeper into the city until eventually, the enormous open structures around them began giving way to narrower flowing corridors, illuminated by soft streams of blue light running beneath the walls. The sounds of distant water echoed more strongly here. Everything felt quieter, hidden. Finally, Ale slowed her pace. Ahead of them stood a smaller structure, partially enclosed by translucent curved walls that shimmered softly beneath the city's glow. Inside, Elias could see floating strands of pale vegetation drifting slowly through shallow pools of illuminated water. Ale gently released his wrist before stepping inside. Then she turned toward him. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them no longer felt as uncomfortable now, still unfamiliar, but softer somehow. Carefully, Elias stepped inside after her. The interior felt warm compared to the rest of the city. The walls emitted a faint, dim glow, casting flowing reflections across the water beneath the floor. Everything inside the structure curved naturally. Nothing sharp, nothing rigid. Even the furniture-like shapes surrounding the room seemed grown rather than built. Elias slowly looked around while Ale observed him quietly from the opposite side of the room. And then, something small caught his attention. Resting near one of the glowing pools was an object unlike anything else he had seen since arriving here. It was old. Its surface was worn and partially covered by strange mineral-like layers formed over time. But despite the damage, Elias recognized it instantly. A compass. Human. From his world, the realization froze him completely. Slowly, Elias stepped closer toward it. Ale noticed the sudden change in his expression immediately. Her eyes moved between Elias and the object resting beside the water. Then, slowly, something shifted in her own expression too. Recognition. As though she understood exactly why the object mattered to him. Elias carefully picked up the compass with trembling fingers. The glass was cracked, the metal corroded by age, but the needle inside still moved weakly beneath the surface. Someone else had been here before him, and judging by the condition of the compass, a very long time ago. For several seconds, Elias could only stare at the compass resting in his hand. The tiny object suddenly made the impossible city around him feel far more real than before, because until now, part of him had still been treating this place like some strange dream created by lack of oxygen and panic. But this belonged to his world, or at least, to the world he knew. The cold metal felt rough beneath his fingertips as he carefully turned it over. There were markings carved into the side, worn almost beyond recognition by time and moisture. Elias narrowed his eyes slightly, then froze. Initials, faint, barely visible, but still there. A.M. A quiet chill moved through him instantly. Someone had truly been here before. Not recently. Years ago. Maybe decades. And somehow that That realization felt even more unsettling than being alone. Slowly, Elias lifted his eyes toward Ale. She knows, he murmured softly to himself. Ale continued watching him from across the glowing room. Even without understanding his words, she clearly understood his reaction. Elias slowly looked up from the compass in his hand. The cold metal suddenly made everything feel real. Someone from the surface had been here before him. He looked toward Ale, confused. Where did this come from? She stepped closer carefully, her glowing eyes moving between Elias and the compass. Then she gently touched the worn metal before pointing upward. Not at the ceiling, higher, toward the world above the ocean. A quiet tension spread through Elias's chest. Someone else had found this place before him. Questions flooded his mind all at once. Who were they? How long ago had they come here? And what happened to them after? Before he could ask anything else, Ale suddenly looked toward the entrance again. This time her expression changed completely. She looked worried. A deep sound echoed faintly through the corridors outside. Low, metallic, rhythmic. Elias heard it too. The vibration moved slowly through the city like something heavy traveling beneath the walls. Ale quickly spoke to him in her flowing language, her voice calm but urgent. He couldn't understand the words, but he understood enough. Someone was coming. Ale gently closed Elias's fingers around the compass again, before guiding him toward the darker side of the room near the glowing pools. Then she turned toward the entrance. A few seconds later, shadows appeared beyond the translucent walls outside. 3 figures approached slowly through the blue light, and judging by the look in Ale's eyes, these people were very different from her. Elias stepped quietly behind the shadows near the water while the 3 figures entered the room. Unlike Ale, they wore darker layered clothing marked with faint glowing lines. Their movements felt controlled, precise. One of them immediately spoke to Ale in a sharp, questioning tone while the others searched the room carefully. Elias stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. For one tense moment, Elias was certain they had already found him. But then Ale answered them calmly. Even without understanding the language, he could tell she was lying. The brief hesitation in her voice gave it away. She was protecting him. One of the strangers slowly walked closer to the glowing pools, only a few feet from where Elias stood, hidden in the shadows. From this close, Elias noticed how different they felt from Ale. The faint light beneath their skin looked colder somehow, and their eyes carried none of the warmth he had seen in hers. These people looked at everything carefully, like trust had disappeared from this place a long time ago. After another short exchange, the strangers finally turned and left the room. Their footsteps slowly faded into the distant corridors until silence filled the room again. Only then did Elias finally breathe. Ale remained near the entrance for a moment, listening carefully to make sure they were truly gone. Then she turned back toward him, and for the first time since meeting her, Elias saw something unmistakably human in her expression. Fear. The soft blue light reflected across the water between them as Elias slowly stepped out from the shadows. The city outside had gone quiet again, but something felt different now. Until this moment, the hidden world beneath the ocean had almost felt peaceful. Now Elias understood there was danger here too. Ale walked closer, still watching him carefully. Elias pointed toward the corridor outside where the strangers had disappeared. Who are they? Ale looked toward the hallway, then back at him. She placed a hand against her chest and slowly opened her fingers outward, gentle. After that, she pointed toward the corridor and closed her hand tightly into a fist. Elias stared at her silently. He didn't understand the language, but he understood the meaning. The people outside were different from her, or maybe they would never accept someone like him inside the city. Ale then walked toward one of the curved, glowing walls near the back of the room. The surface reacted the moment she touched it. Soft streams of light spread beneath the wall before part of it slowly opened, revealing a hidden space behind it. Elias froze. Inside the hidden chamber were objects that clearly did not belong in this world. Old diving equipment, rust-covered tools, broken masks, water-damaged notebooks. human objects, from the surface. He stepped closer slowly, his chest tightening as he looked around. Some of the equipment looked incredibly old. Then Elias noticed something hanging near the far side of the room, a photograph. The image had almost faded away completely, but he could still make out a group of people standing beside the ocean. Behind them, the same cliffs Elias had left from before his dive. A cold feeling spread through him. This place had been discovered before, and suddenly, a far more frightening question entered his mind. If others had found this hidden city before him, why had none of them ever returned? Elias kept staring at the photograph while Ale quietly watched him from the entrance of the chamber. Even without words, she seemed to understand why these objects mattered so much to him. Elias slowly looked back at her. How long have these been here? Ale didn't understand the words, but she understood the question. Her eyes drifted across the old equipment and faded notebooks around the room. For a brief moment, something softer crossed her expression. Not sadness exactly, more like memory. Then a deep sound echoed somewhere far beyond the walls. Low, heavy, rhythmic. The room itself seemed to vibrate slightly. Ale's expression changed immediately. She quickly dimmed several glowing streams along the walls, covering the chamber in darker blue shadows. Then she grabbed Elias's wrist firmly. This time, there was no hesitation in her movements. Ale pulled him toward a narrow opening beside the chamber. A dark passage stretched downward beneath the city. Then the sound came again, louder this time. Elias could hear movement outside now. Fast footsteps, voices echoing through the halls. Something was happening up in the city, and whatever it was, people were scared. Aiel looked at him one last time before putting a finger gently against her lips. Stay quiet. Then she disappeared into the dark passage below. Elias hesitated for only a second before following her down. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Soon, even the sounds from the city above faded away, until all he could hear were their footsteps echoing through the tunnel. Thin streams of blue light ran beneath the floor, just enough to guide them through the darkness. The walls looked older down here, rough stone instead of the smooth glowing structures above. Symbols were carved everywhere, worn down by time. Ale kept moving quickly, but Elias noticed the tension in her now. She kept listening behind them like she expected something to follow. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Elias stopped immediately. A dark ocean stretched through the cavern, disappearing into shadows far beyond sight. Thousands of tiny glowing lights floated above the water like stars, and in the center of it all, something enormous rested beneath the surface. At first, Elias thought it was some kind of structure. Then it moved. A slow pulse of blue light spread through the water, revealing part of a massive body beneath the surface. The thing looked ancient, almost too large for his mind to process. And when another deep sound echoed through the chamber, Elias realized it was breathing. Ale slowly stepped toward the edge of the water. The blue light reflected across her face as she looked down into the darkness beneath the surface. Then, very quietly, she said a single word. Velun. The name echoed softly through the cavern. And somehow Elias immediately understood. Whatever this thing was, it was the heart of the entire city. Elias couldn't stop staring at it. Every few seconds, faint blue light moved through the creature's body beneath the water, sending soft pulses across the chamber walls. Suddenly, everything about the city above made sense. The glowing streets, the strange energy flowing through the buildings, the quiet hum he had been hearing since waking up. All of it was connected to this thing. Aiel slowly knelt beside the water and lowered her hand toward the surface. The moment her fingers touched it, the creature reacted. A deep pulse of light spread through the underground sea, bright enough to illuminate the entire chamber. Elias instinctively stepped back, not because it attacked, because it suddenly felt aware of him. Ale looked back at him and slowly held out her hand. An invitation. Elias hesitated. Everything about this place felt wrong now, but curiosity pulled him forward anyway. Carefully, he stepped beside her and reached toward the black water. The instant his fingers touched the surface, the entire chamber exploded with blue light. For one terrifying second, Elias saw the creature clearly beneath the water. Its body stretched endlessly into the darkness below, covered in glowing veins of pale blue light, and trapped inside it, he saw human figures, dozens of them, suspended motionless within the creature's body. Elias pulled his hand away instantly, his heart pounding. Darkness rushed back over the chamber. Only the creature's slow breathing remained. Elias stared into the water, trying to process what he had just seen. Then he looked at Aile. What was that? She didn't answer right away. For the first time since meeting her, she looked uncertain too. Aile quickly grabbed his wrist and pulled him away from the edge of the water. The fear in her face felt real now. Elias looked back toward the dark sea. Those people inside the creature. He knew he had seen them clearly. Aile. What is that thing? She looked toward Valen again before pointing first at Elias, then at the water. Then she pointed toward the creature beneath the surface. Elias frowned, trying to understand. You felt something? Aile stayed quiet for a second before slowly nodding. A cold feeling moved through his chest. Because she was right. The moment he touched the water, it hadn't just reacted to him, it had recognized him. A deep vibration suddenly rolled through the chamber again. Stronger this time. Dust drifted from the ceiling as lights slowly began appearing across the far side of the underground sea. People, large groups moving through the distant pathways with glowing lanterns. And even from this far away, Elias could tell they were searching for something. Aile looked back at Elias immediately, then toward the approaching lights. And for the first time since arriving in this hidden city, Elias understood something clearly. His presence here was becoming dangerous. Not just for him, for everyone around him too. Aile stepped closer and gently placed the old compass back into his hand. She closed his fingers around it before pressing a hand softly against her chest. Elias had started understanding that gesture. Trust. Then Aile pointed toward another narrow tunnel descending even deeper beneath the chamber. The lights across the underground sea kept getting closer. When Elias looked back at her, he understood exactly what she meant. Run. Elias didn't move at first. Every instinct inside him resisted leaving her there alone. But the lights across the cavern were getting closer by the second. Aile stepped slightly in front of him, almost like she was trying to shield him from whoever was coming. That's when Elias realized what she was planning to do. Distract them. No, Elias whispered immediately, shaking his head. Aile didn't understand the word, but she understood the emotion behind it. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed her face. Then distant voices echoed through the chamber. There was no time left. Aile looked toward the tunnel behind him one last time. Run. The meaning couldn't have been clearer. Elias tightened his grip around the compass before finally stepping backward toward the tunnel. Aile stayed near the water, watching him quietly. Just before he disappeared into the darkness below, their eyes met one last time across the glowing reflections moving through the cavern. Neither of them spoke, neither needed to. Then Elias turned and descended deeper beneath the city. The silence down here felt different too. Not peaceful like the city above, heavy, like something had been sleeping beneath these ruins for a very long time. Elias kept moving, gripping the compass tightly while thoughts raced through his mind. The people trapped inside Valen, the hidden city, Aile. None of it felt real anymore. Then, far ahead, Elias saw faint blue light spilling through the tunnel. He slowed carefully as the passage opened into another enormous chamber. At the center stood a massive circular structure built into the stone, a door. Its surface was covered in glowing symbols that moved slowly like flowing water. And standing in front of it was another human being. At least, he looked human. Unlike Aile and the others, there were almost no glowing patterns beneath his skin. He looked older, tired, like someone who had spent far too many years trapped in this place. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the man finally looked at Elias and said quietly, "You shouldn't have come here." The words hit Elias harder than anything else since arriving beneath the ocean. Clear English. A familiar human voice. "You speak English?" Elias asked in disbelief. The older man gave a small nod. Yes. Even that single word sounded rusty, like he hadn't spoken it in years. Elias stared at him, unsure whether to feel relieved or even more afraid. The man's eyes slowly dropped toward the compass in Elias's hand. Something changed in his expression the moment he saw it. "You found her collection," he said quietly. Elias tightened his grip on the compass. "You know what this place is?" The man stayed silent for a moment before finally looking up toward the city far above them. This city should not exist anymore. Silence filled the chamber. The glowing symbols on the massive door moved slowly behind him like living currents. Elias took a cautious step forward. "What are those people up there?" he asked. "Who are they?" For the first time, something sad crossed the older man's face. They're what remained of humanity after it tried to survive the ocean. The answer only confused Elias more. What does that even mean? The older man looked at him carefully, and for the first time Elias noticed something behind the exhaustion in his eyes. Fear. Not fear of Elias. Fear of what Elias was about to learn. Then the man slowly stepped aside from the glowing door behind him. As he moved, the symbols across the door brightened softly. That's when Elias noticed the shape at the center of it. A human handprint. The older man looked back at him. "Valen awakened because of you." The word sent a chill through Elias instantly. "Because of me?" he asked quietly. The man nodded once. "You touched the water connected to it directly." Elias shook his head immediately. "That doesn't make any sense. I don't even know what this thing is. And yet it reacted to you." Elias thought back to the underground sea, the blue light, the feeling that something ancient had suddenly noticed him. A quiet unease spread through his chest again. The older man slowly looked toward the glowing door. "They told you nothing up there?" "I can barely communicate with them," Elias replied. At the mention of the city above, the man's expression softened slightly. "Aiel found you." Elias looked up immediately. "You know her?" The man gave a small nod. "She should never have brought you here." Despite the words, he didn't sound angry. He sounded worried. "Who are you?" Elias asked. The man stayed quiet for a moment before answering. "My name is Marcus." The name felt strangely normal compared to everything around them. Human, grounding. And somehow that made the situation feel even more unreal. Marcus slowly exhaled. "I arrived here 32 years ago." Elias stared at him in disbelief. "You came from the surface?" Marcus nodded once. "Just like you." The chamber fell quiet again. For a while, Marcus continued. "I thought I had discovered paradise." The way he said it made Elias immediately realize how wrong that belief had been. "The city above is called Illyria," Marcus said quietly. "They believe this place saved them, protected them from what happened to the world above." His eyes drifted upward toward the unseen city. "But they don't understand what's really keeping it alive." Elias already knew the answer before Marcus said it. "Valen." Marcus nodded slowly. "The creature beneath the city." Elias swallowed. "What is it?" For the first time since they met, Marcus hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, because he hated it. Finally, he spoke. "Valen is older than humanity." The distant vibrations moving through the ruins suddenly felt much heavier. "The people of Illyria see it as a guardian," Marcus continued. "A living source of energy." His voice lowered slightly. "But Valen was never protecting them." Elias frowned. "Then what's it doing?" Marcus looked at him for a long moment before answering. "It was sleeping." A deep vibration suddenly shook the chamber, much stronger than before. Dust drifted from the ceiling while the glowing symbols across the giant door lit up brighter. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, the fear in his face was obvious. "You should never have touched the water," Another deep pulse rolled through the ruins. The glowing symbols on the door moved faster now, spreading across the stone like flowing veins of light. "What's happening?" Elias asked. Marcus kept his eyes on the door. For generations, Valen stayed dormant. His voice sounded tense now. The city survived because it slept. Elias looked at him in confusion. "That thing is keeping the city alive?" "Yes," Marcus replied quietly, "and consuming it at the same time." The words hit harder than Elias expected. His thoughts immediately went back to the people trapped inside Valen's body beneath the water. A cold feeling spread through his chest. "What are those people inside it?" Elias asked. Marcus looked away for a moment before answering. "They're what Valen takes." Another vibration shook the chamber. "The people of Illyria believe becoming part of Valen is sacred," Marcus continued quietly. "But fewer and fewer of them ever come back." Elias thought about the city above, the silence, the emotionally distant people, the strange emptiness behind their calmness. "They've been changing," he said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Living beneath the ocean changed them physically." His expression darkened slightly. "But Valen changed everything else." Another violent tremor shook the ruins. Somewhere far above them, the underground sea roared faintly through the stone. The glowing symbols around the door flashed brighter again. Marcus stared at it, fear returning to his face. Then quietly, almost to himself, he whispered, "It remembers you." Elias frowned. "What does that mean?" Marcus stepped slowly away from the door while the glowing symbols shifted toward the center, toward the handprint, toward Elias. "You touched the water directly," Marcus said quietly. "No outsider has done that in decades." Another deep vibration rolled through the chamber. This one felt different, aware. Suddenly, the handprint at the center of the door lit up completely. Bright blue light filled the chamber, and in the next second, images slammed into Elias's mind. A dark ocean, massive underwater cities, thousands of people descending beneath the sea, then panic, fear, and finally, silence. Elias staggered backward, gripping his head. The visions vanished instantly. Marcus caught him before he fell. "What did you see?" Elias struggled to breathe steadily. I don't know," but fragments still lingered in his mind. The city, not as it was now. Older, full of life, full of people. Elias saw children running beside glowing rivers beneath the ocean. The city looked completely different back then. People filled the streets, voices echoed through massive halls, and for a brief moment, the place actually felt alive. But then, the feeling changed. Far beneath the city, something enormous moved through the darkness under the water, and somehow Elias could feel that it had been there the entire time. Elias slowly lifted his eyes toward Marcus. "It showed me all that." Marcus stayed quiet for a moment before nodding. "I think Valen is trying to remember something through you." The sentence sent another uneasy feeling through Elias's chest. Before he could respond, footsteps suddenly echoed through the tunnel behind them. Multiple people, getting closer fast. Marcus immediately turned toward the tunnel. "They found us." The exhaustion disappeared from his face, replaced by focus. He quickly moved toward the giant circular door and placed his hand against the glowing symbols. The entire chamber vibrated softly in response. "You need to leave," he said. Elias looked toward the darkness beyond the opening door. "Leave, and go where?" Marcus said, "There are places under Illyria even the people above are afraid of." The door slowly opened wider, revealing nothing but a deep black passage descending far below. Cold air drifted out from it. Elias felt uneasy the moment he looked inside. Whatever existed down there, it was older than the city itself. The footsteps outside were getting closer now. Marcus looked back at Elias. "Ale was right to save you." Then he glanced toward the darkness beyond the door again. "If Valen chose you," he said quietly, "then this city is about to change forever." The voices in the tunnel suddenly became louder. They were almost there. Marcus grabbed Elias's arm firmly. "Listen to me carefully." His voice was calm, but urgent. The people above believe Valen keeps them alive. Another vibration rolled through the ruins beneath their feet. But the truth is much worse than that. The glowing symbols around the doorway flickered faster as distant shadows began appearing in the tunnel behind them. Valen doesn't think like humans do. Marcus continued. For centuries it stayed dormant while slowly feeding from the minds connected to it. Elias frowned. Feeding? Marcus nodded once. Memories, emotions, consciousness. The words made Elias think of Illyria immediately. The silence, the emptiness behind people's eyes, the way emotions seemed faded here. Marcus looked toward him carefully. But something about you woke it up. Elias shook his head. I'm nobody. Marcus gave a tired look. No one is nobody to something older than humanity. At that moment, several figures finally stepped into the chamber behind them. One of them immediately locked eyes with Elias. Unlike the others Elias had seen before, this person carried glowing markings across their face and neck, moving beneath the skin like streams of light underwater. They spoke sharply in Illyria's language, while the others spread through the chamber. Marcus stepped in front of Elias without hesitation. The figure's eyes suddenly shifted toward the open doorway behind them, and their expression changed immediately. Fear. Real fear. The figure quickly spoke to the others, warning them to stay back from the doorway. Elias looked between them in confusion. They're scared of what's down there. Marcus kept his eyes on the group. Yes, he said quietly, because that's where Illyria buried the truth. A deep sound suddenly echoed from somewhere far below the open doorway. Not violin, something else. The entire chamber went silent. Even the people near the tunnel looked shaken now. The sound felt ancient, almost impossible to describe, like something enormous shifting far beneath the ruins after centuries of sleep. Marcus slowly stepped backward toward the doorway. You hear it now, he said quietly. Elias couldn't answer. The sound seemed to vibrate inside his chest more than through the air around him. Then suddenly, another flash of memory hit him. Dark water, stone towers buried beneath the ocean floor, and thousands of frightened voices disappearing into silence. Elias stumbled slightly. Marcus noticed immediately. It's happening faster now. One of the figures near the tunnel spoke urgently to Marcus, clearly demanding the doorway be closed. Marcus answered in their language this time. Even without understanding the words, Elias could tell the argument was getting tense. The others wanted this place sealed again. Marcus refused. The figure closest to the tunnel looked back at Elias with open fear. Now, not anger, fear, like his presence alone threatened something dangerous. Marcus turned toward Elias again. You still don't understand what Illyria really is. Another deep vibration rolled through the ruins below them. The city above was not humanity's first attempt to survive beneath the ocean. Elias frowned. What do you mean? Marcus looked around the buried ruins surrounding them. These tunnels, these structures, all of this existed before Illyria. Elias stared at him. You mean another civilization lived here? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he slowly shook his head. Humanity has already done this before. The chamber trembled violently. Far above them, alarm-like sounds echoed faintly through the hidden city. The people near the tunnel reacted immediately, panic spreading across their faces. Marcus looked upward for a second before speaking again. Valen is waking the others. The word sent a cold feeling through Elias instantly. The others? Elias repeated. Marcus nodded slowly. Long before Illyria existed, humanity built cities beneath the ocean after the surface world began collapsing. His voice echoed softly through the ruins. At first, those cities worked. People believed the ocean would save them. Marcus looked toward the darkness below the doorway. Then they found Valen. At first they thought it was a miracle, Marcus continued. An ancient life form that could produce endless energy. The blue light moving across the chamber walls reflected faintly in his tired eyes. And for a while, it really did save them. Then his expression darkened. But humanity misunderstood what it actually was. Valen doesn't consume bodies, Marcus said quietly. It consumes memory, emotion, consciousness. Elias immediately thought of Illyria again. The calmness, the emotional emptiness, the way people felt distant from one another. Marcus noticed the realization in his face. The cities survived beneath the ocean, he said. But little by little, people stopped being human. The first underwater civilizations eventually collapsed, Marcus continued, not because Valen attacked them. He looked toward the dark sea far below the ruins. They simply lost themselves. The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Illyria was built much later by survivors who believed they could control it this time. Another deep vibration echoed beneath their feet. But Valen was never sleeping completely, Marcus said. It was waiting. The figures behind them exchanged nervous looks as another tremor moved through the ruins. Elias looked toward the open doorway leading deeper underground. So what's down there? Marcus followed his gaze. The remains of the first city. His voice lowered slightly. And the reason Illyria fears the truth. For a second, nobody in the chamber spoke. Then one of the figures suddenly stepped forward and pointed directly at Elias while speaking sharply to Marcus. Marcus answered immediately, more aggressively this time. The tension between them rose fast. Elias couldn't understand the words, but one thing was obvious. They were arguing about him. The figure looked toward the open doorway again before speaking in a lower, uneasy voice. Marcus listened silently. Then he turned back toward Elias. They think Valen chose you for a reason. Elias frowned immediately. What reason? Marcus didn't answer right away. That alone made the fear in Elias's chest worse. Finally, Marcus looked toward the darkness below the ruins. Because you're the first outsider it has reacted to in decades. Another low vibration echoed through the chamber. Not violent this time. Almost responsive. Elias felt it again. That strange awareness beneath the city, like something deep below the ocean, had fully noticed him now. Then the lights across the chamber suddenly dimmed. Everyone froze. The glowing symbols around the doorway faded almost completely before turning dark blue. Marcus's expression changed immediately. That's not possible, he whispered. A second later, the entire ruin shook hard enough to crack stone along the walls. And from somewhere far below, something massive began moving. The sound rolled upward through the ruins like distant thunder under the ocean. Not fast, slow, heavy. Every movement carried enough force to shake the stone beneath their feet. The figures near the tunnel backed away immediately, fear spreading across their faces. Marcus stared into the darkness below the doorway, then quietly said, "It's coming closer." Elias felt his pulse rising. What exactly is down there? Marcus didn't take his eyes off the darkness. The first city connected itself to Valen more deeply than Illyria ever did. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. They believed becoming one with it would save humanity forever. His voice lowered. It destroyed them instead. A loud cracking sound echoed through the ruins. Part of the stone floor near the doorway collapsed into darkness below. Cold air rushed upward from the opening, and for a brief second, Elias saw movement far beneath the ruins, something enormous passing slowly through the shadows under the city. The people near the tunnel immediately stepped farther back. One of them began speaking rapidly, panic clear in their voice now. Marcus finally turned toward Elias again. "You need to understand something." The chamber trembled once more. Valen isn't waking up alone. Elias felt a cold heaviness settle in his chest as the sound of something moving below continued getting closer. Marcus pointed toward the darkness beneath the broken floor. When the first city collapsed, not everyone died. Elias stared at him. "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated for only a second. Some of them stayed connected to Valen for centuries. Another deep sound echoed from below. This one almost sounded alive. A shape briefly moved beneath the darkness under the ruins. Too large, too fast to understand clearly, but Elias caught enough to feel his stomach tighten. It looked human, At least partly. One of the figures behind Marcus stepped back in fear after seeing it too. Marcus slowly closed his eyes for a moment. They're still down there. The chamber fell completely silent after that. Even the people behind them stopped speaking. Elias kept staring into the darkness below the broken floor. His mind struggled to process what Marcus had just said. "You're telling me there are still people alive under this city?" Marcus looked exhausted. Not people anymore. Another sound echoed upward from the ruins below. Closer now. Wet footsteps against stone. Slow. Dragging. One of the figures near the tunnel quietly backed away, clearly terrified. Elias felt his chest tighten as the sound continued through the darkness beneath them. Something was climbing up. The sound kept getting closer through the darkness below. Then finally, a figure pulled itself slowly onto the broken edge of the floor. Everyone in the chamber froze. At first glance, it looked human, but something about it felt wrong. Its skin carried faint blue light beneath it like cracked veins, and its movements were slow and unnatural, almost like it had forgotten how a human body was supposed to move. The figure lifted its head slowly toward them. Its eyes looked empty, not dead, just distant, like there was barely anything left inside. One of the people behind Marcus whispered something in fear, but the creature didn't attack. It simply stood there staring at Elias. And somehow, that felt worse. Elias couldn't look away. There was something deeply unsettling about the way it watched him. Not with anger. Recognition. The creature took another slow step forward, and for a brief moment, Elias noticed traces of emotion flicker across its face. Almost like the person it used to be was still buried somewhere inside. Marcus spoke quietly. They were connected to Valen for too long. The creature's eyes suddenly shifted toward the glowing doorway behind them, then toward Elias again. It opened its mouth slightly, struggling to speak. At first, only broken sounds came out. Then finally, in a weak, distorted voice, it said, "Wake-ing." The entire chamber went still. The creature twitched slightly, like forcing the word out had caused it pain. Then it looked directly at Elias again. "Valen. Waking." Marcus stepped forward carefully. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. The creature's glowing eyes moved slowly across the chamber. Fear spread across its face. Real fear. "It remembers," the creature whispered. The words barely sounded human anymore. Before anyone could respond, another deep vibration rolled through the ruins, much stronger than before. The creature suddenly reacted in panic, stepping backward toward the darkness below. Then Elias heard it too. More sounds coming from beneath the city. Not one. Many. The distant noises echoed through the ruins like a crowd slowly moving in the dark. Wet footsteps. Dragging movements, whispers that didn't fully sound human anymore. The people near the tunnel looked terrified now. Marcus immediately grabbed Elias's arm. "We can't stay here." For the first time since meeting him, Elias saw genuine panic in Marcus's eyes. Another figure suddenly appeared below the broken floor. Then another. More pale, glowing faces slowly emerged from the darkness beneath the ruins. Some still looked partly human, others barely did anymore, but all of them were staring toward the chamber above, toward Elias. Elias felt his chest tighten. "Why are they looking at me like that?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. The creatures below kept gathering silently in the darkness. Then Marcus finally said what he had clearly been avoiding this entire time. "Because Valen is connected to your mind now." Elias immediately shook his head. "No, that's impossible." But even as he said it, he remembered the visions, the feeling when he touched the water, the strange awareness beneath the city. Marcus looked at him carefully. "You're hearing it too, aren't you?" Elias stayed silent. That was answer enough. Another painful pulse suddenly hit Elias's mind. This time the vision was clearer. He saw the first underwater city collapsing into chaos. People screaming as blue light spread through flooded streets, others willingly walking into the dark water below the city, not forced, called. Elias grabbed the side of the wall to steady himself. The emotions inside the vision felt overwhelming. Fear, grief, but underneath all of it, loneliness. an endless, crushing loneliness that didn't feel human at all. And for one terrifying moment, Elias understood Velun wasn't angry. It was alone. The vision faded, but the feeling stayed with him. Elias slowly looked up, breathing unevenly. Marcus noticed the change in his face immediately. "You felt it." Elias nodded weakly. "It wasn't trying to hurt them," he said quietly. The creatures below the ruins remained perfectly still, watching him in silence. Marcus's expression darkened. "That's what makes this worse." Another tremor shook the chamber. Far above them, faint alarm sounds echoed through Illyria again. The city was starting to realize something was wrong. Marcus looked toward the tunnel leading back upward. If the others find out Valen connected itself to an outsider, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. One of the creatures below suddenly took another step upward into the light. This one looked older than the others. Its glowing eyes stayed fixed on Elias. Then, slowly, it raised a trembling hand toward him. Not threatening, almost desperate, and in a broken whisper it said, "Help us." A heavy silence filled the chamber after the words left its mouth. Elias stared at the creature, unable to move, because beneath the distorted voice and glowing skin, he could still hear something human in it. Marcus looked shaken too. "I've never heard them speak this clearly before," he admitted quietly. The creature's hand slowly lowered, but its eyes never left Elias. Then Elias noticed something else. The creatures behind it weren't acting aggressive. They looked exhausted, broken, like people trapped in something they no longer understood. A painful realization slowly settled into his chest. These weren't monsters hiding beneath the city. They were survivors. Marcus looked toward the growing crowd below the ruins. For years, Illyria believed the first city was destroyed. His voice felt quieter now, but some of them stayed connected to Valen instead of dying. Another low vibration moved through the chamber. Elias looked toward the darkness beneath the ruins again. "They've been down there this whole time?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Hidden beneath the city. Forgotten." The word carried obvious guilt behind it. Elias looked back at the creatures below. Some still wore pieces of ancient clothing. Others looked barely aware of where they even were anymore. And suddenly the fear he felt earlier began changing into something else. Pity. The older creature stepped closer to the broken edge again. Its glowing eyes stayed fixed on Elias. Then quietly, struggling through each word, it said, "Valen." "Afraid." Marcus frowned immediately. Afraid of what? The creature's expression twitched painfully. Then it looked upward, toward Illyria above them. A cold silence settled over the chamber. Elias slowly looked toward Marcus. "What does that mean?" Marcus didn't answer right away. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely uncertain. Then another pulse moved through the ruins. But this one felt different, not violent. Sad. Elias felt it deep in his chest, not like hearing a sound, more like feeling an emotion that didn't belong to him. And suddenly another memory flashed through his mind. The first underwater city. People gathering around Valen beneath the ocean, not worshiping it, comforting it. The vision disappeared almost instantly. Elias looked up again, stunned. Marcus noticed immediately. "What did you see?" Elias struggled to explain it. "They weren't afraid of Valen at first," he said quietly. "They were trying to help it." The chamber went silent again after those words. Marcus slowly looked toward the dark water beneath the ruins. "For years I thought Valen destroyed the first city." He sounded less certain now. But maybe both sides destroyed each other. Another low pulse moved through the chamber. The creatures below remained completely still, listening. And for the first time, the ruins no longer felt hostile. Elias looked at the exhausted figures gathered below. What if they were trying to stop it from being alone? Marcus didn't respond immediately. The idea clearly unsettled him. Because if Elias was right, then humanity hadn't simply been victims here. They had willingly connected themselves to something ancient and suffering, believing they could understand it. Another quiet pulse spread through the ruins. This time, Elias noticed something strange. The creatures below seemed calmer when he spoke, almost like Valen itself was listening through them. Marcus noticed it too. His expression slowly shifted from fear to realization. Then quietly, he asked, "What exactly did Valen show you?" Elias looked toward the dark water beneath the ruins. He tried putting the feeling into words. "It felt lonely," he said finally. The chamber stayed silent. Not violent, not angry, just alone for a very long time. One of the creatures below lowered its head slowly after hearing that, almost like it understood exactly what Elias meant.
Marcus stared at the ruins beneath them in silence. For centuries, everyone treated Valoon like a danger to contain, he said quietly. Another pulse moved through the chamber. But maybe no one ever stopped to ask what it wanted. Elias looked toward the dark water again, and for the first time since arriving beneath the ocean, he stopped feeling afraid of it.
A soft sound echoed through the ruins behind them. Footsteps. Elias turned immediately. Ael had finally found them. She stepped into the chamber, breathing heavily, clearly having rushed through the tunnels to reach them. The moment she saw the creatures gathered below the broken floor, she froze. Then her eyes moved toward Elias. Relief crossed her face instantly. Ael hurried toward him and grabbed his arm tightly, almost like she needed to make sure he was really there. Marcus watched quietly while Elias tried explaining everything at once. "The people below, they're still alive." Ael looked confused at first. Then one of the creatures slowly stepped forward into the light behind Elias, and the color drained from her face. She whispered something quietly in her own language, not fear, recognition. Marcus noticed immediately. "You've seen them before." Ael hesitated for a moment before slowly nodding. Then she pointed toward the city above them and lowered her eyes. Elias understood what she meant. Illyria knew the creatures existed. "They hid this from everyone," Marcus said quietly. Ael looked uncomfortable hearing that. She tried explaining something quickly to Elias, using broken gestures and scattered words he barely understood, but one thing became clear. The people of Illyria believed the ones below were dangerous, cursed, and over time, the city chose to forget them entirely. Elias looked back at the creatures gathered beneath the ruins. They didn't look dangerous anymore. They looked abandoned. One of them slowly sat down against the stone wall like it no longer had the strength to stand. Another kept staring at the glowing water below in silence. And suddenly, the hidden truth beneath Illyria felt far more tragic than terrifying. Ael slowly stepped closer to the edge of the broken floor. The creatures watched her carefully, but none of them moved aggressively. One of the older figures raised a trembling hand slightly toward her. Ael froze. Then, very cautiously, she raised her own hand back. The chamber remained completely silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the older creature slowly lowered its hand and spoke again in that weak, distorted voice. "Forgotten." The word echoed softly through the ruins. Ael's expression changed immediately, because even without fully understanding them, she understood that word. Elias looked between Ael and the creatures below. "This whole time," he said quietly, "they were still down here waiting for someone to remember them." Marcus lowered his eyes. The guilt on his face said enough. Above them, another distant vibration rolled through Illyria, but now the sound no longer felt threatening. It felt mournful. One of the younger creatures slowly stepped forward beside the older one. Unlike the others, its eyes looked clearer somehow, more aware. It stared at Ael for a long moment before speaking softly. "City. Afraid." Ael listened carefully. The creature pointed upward toward Illyria, then toward the dark water below. "Valen. Hurting." Elias frowned. "Hurting?" The creature nodded weakly. Marcus stepped closer now, fully listening. The creature struggled for a moment before continuing. "Connected. Too many minds." Understanding slowly spread across Marcus's face. Then he looked toward the dark sea beneath the ruins with horror. "Valoon isn't attacking the city," he whispered. "It's drowning in everyone connected to it." The chamber fell silent again. Elias slowly looked toward the water. All this time, Illyria believed Valen was some endless source of life beneath the ocean. But now the truth sounded much sadder. The creature had spent centuries carrying the emotions, memories, and minds of entire civilizations, and eventually, it started breaking under the weight of them all. Marcus slowly sat down against the stone wall, overwhelmed by the realization. "For years we feared it waking up," he said quietly. But maybe Valen was never trying to destroy Illyria. Another soft pulse moved through the ruins beneath them. This time it felt weak, exhausted. Marcus looked toward Elias. It was trying to survive. Elias stared into the dark water in silence. The loneliness he felt earlier suddenly made sense now. Valen wasn't some evil force beneath the ocean. It was carrying centuries of fear, grief, and human emotion completely alone. No wonder the creature was suffering. Ael slowly looked toward the ruins below them, her expression softer now. For the first time, even she no longer seemed afraid of it. The older creature near the edge of the ruins slowly looked toward Elias again. Then, with visible effort, it spoke one final sentence. "Vaelen." Tired. The words hit the chamber with a strange heaviness. Not because they sounded threatening, because they sounded painfully human. And suddenly Elias understood something terrifying. If Valen finally collapsed, Illyria would collapse with it. A heavy silence settled over the ruins after those words. Everyone in the chamber understood the same thing at once. Illyria had built its entire existence around a creature that was slowly dying beneath the city. Marcus slowly stood again, still staring toward the dark water. "If Valen collapses," he said quietly, "the energy holding Illyria together may disappear with it." Ael looked visibly shaken by the thought. One of the creatures below pointed weakly toward Elias again. "Connected." Marcus frowned slightly, then his expression changed. "You can still feel Valen, can't you?" Elias hesitated before nodding. Very faintly, deep in the back of his mind, he could still sense the creature's emotions moving beneath the city. Not words, feelings. Marcus slowly looked toward the others in the chamber, then back at Elias. "If anyone can reach Valen now, it's probably you." Elias immediately shook his head. "I don't even understand what's happening." "You understand more than anyone else here," Marcus replied quietly. Another soft pulse moved through the ruins beneath them, weaker than before. Ael stepped closer beside Elias. Even without fully understanding the conversation, she could tell what Marcus was suggesting. Her expression tightened immediately. She didn't want Elias going anywhere near Valen again. Marcus noticed. "I know," he said softly. "But if we do nothing, Illyria dies with it." The words hung heavily in the chamber. Elias looked toward the dark water below. Somewhere beneath the ruins, Valen was still there, carrying the weight of countless minds and memories alone. And for the first time, Elias stopped seeing the creature as something mysterious. It sounded exhausted, almost broken. One of the creatures below slowly stepped forward again. This time it pointed deeper beneath the ruins, toward the darkness far below the broken city. Marcus immediately understood. "The original chamber," he whispered. Elias looked at him. "What original chamber?" Marcus looked uneasy again. "The first place humanity connected itself to Valen." Even the creatures below seemed nervous at the mention of it. Marcus stared into the darkness beneath the ruins for a moment before continuing. "If Valen can still be reached directly, it would be there." Ael immediately shook her head. "No," she said firmly in her own language. It was one of the clearest words Elias had ever heard from her. Marcus looked toward her calmly. "I don't want him going down there either." Another pulse moved through the ruins. Weak, painful, but we're running out of time. Elias stayed quiet for a moment. Then he looked toward the dark passage descending deeper beneath the ruins. "What happens if I go there?" Marcus answered honestly. "I don't know." The uncertainty in his voice felt more frightening than any warning could have. Still, Elias could feel it now. Something below was calling to him. Not with words, with emotion. A strange pull deep in his chest, filled with exhaustion, grief, and something else beneath it all. Hope. Like Valen had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally understand what it was feeling. Elias slowly tightened his grip around the old compass still in his hand. Then he looked toward Ale. She was still watching him with obvious worry in her eyes. Elias gave her a small, reassuring smile, even though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "I'll come back," he said quietly. Ale didn't understand every word, but she understood enough. She stepped closer and gently took the compass from his hand for a moment. Then she pressed it back against his chest carefully, almost like a reminder to hold on to who he was before all of this. The gesture hit Elias harder than he expected, because beneath the fear and confusion, this place had started feeling like home. Marcus moved toward the dark passage leading deeper below the ruins. "I'll take you as far as I can," he said. The creatures near the broken floor slowly stepped aside, silently allowing them through. As Elias followed Marcus toward the darkness beneath the city, he looked back one last time. Ale was still standing there watching him, and for the first time since arriving beneath the ocean, he was afraid he might not see her again. The passage leading downward was colder than the tunnels above. The air felt heavier too, almost carrying the pressure of the ocean itself through the stone walls. Neither Elias nor Marcus spoke much while descending deeper beneath the ruins. The deeper they went, the older everything looked. Ancient carvings covered the walls, worn down by time and water, and everywhere, the same symbol kept appearing, a circle surrounded by flowing lines. Violin. After a while, the tunnel opened into a massive cavern, unlike anything Elias had seen before. An entire city rested beneath them. Not ruins. A real city. Ancient towers stretched through the darkness under the ocean, connected by broken bridges and glowing pathways now half submerged beneath black water. Elias stopped completely. "This was the first city?" he whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. "The first place humanity tried to escape the collapse of the surface world." His voice echoed quietly through the cavern. Even abandoned, the city still felt strangely alive beneath the dark water. Faint blue light moved through parts of the structures far below, pulsing slowly through the ruins like a heartbeat that never fully stopped. Elias stared across the ancient city in silence. It felt beautiful, but also deeply sad. Like a place built by people who truly believed they had found humanity's future beneath the ocean. Marcus looked toward the flooded streets below. "They were hopeful at first," he said quietly. Then Valen became part of everything. They slowly descended through the ruins, using a narrow stone pathway built along the side of the cavern. The deeper they went, the stronger Elias could feel Valen's presence. Not physically, emotionally. It felt exhausted, like something carrying far more pain than it was ever meant to hold alone. As they reached the lower parts of the city, Elias noticed signs that people had once truly lived here. Homes, gathering places. Children's drawings faded onto the walls, small human details still preserved beneath centuries of darkness and water. And somehow that made the ruins feel even more tragic. Eventually, Marcus stopped near the center of the ancient city. Ahead of them stood an enormous circular structure rising from the black water. Unlike the rest of the ruins, this place still glowed brightly with flowing blue light. The closer Elias looked, the more he realized something unsettling. The structure wasn't built around Valen, it was built into it. Blue light moved slowly beneath the walls like veins under skin. The entire structure felt alive. Elias stopped walking without even realizing it. A deep emotional pressure filled the air around them now. Sadness, loneliness, relief. Marcus quietly looked toward the glowing entrance ahead. This is where everything began. As they stepped inside, Elias immediately felt the temperature change. The air was warmer here. The walls pulsed softly with light around them, almost breathing. At the center of the chamber stood a massive pool of dark water completely still beneath the glowing ceiling above. And unlike before, Elias could feel Valen clearly now. The feeling was overwhelming. Not like hearing thoughts, more like standing inside someone else's emotions. Centuries of loneliness pressed quietly against his mind. Marcus stopped near the entrance and looked at him carefully. "This is as far as I go." Elias turned toward him. "You're not coming?" Marcus slowly shook his head. "I connected to Valen once, years ago." His expression darkened slightly. "It almost destroyed me." The chamber remained silent except for the soft movement of light beneath the walls. Marcus looked toward the water at the center. "But for some reason, it wants you here." Elias looked toward the dark pool again. The closer he got, the stronger the emotions became. Not threatening, just unbearably heavy, like listening to someone silently suffer for centuries without anyone truly understanding them. Marcus stepped back toward the entrance. "If you reach it," he said quietly, "don't fight what you feel." Then Marcus disappeared back into the ruins, leaving Elias alone inside the glowing chamber. For a moment, Elias simply stood there listening to the soft pulses moving through the walls around him. The entire place felt alive. Slowly, he walked toward the water, and with every step, the feeling of loneliness grew stronger. By the time Elias reached the edge of the pool, his chest felt tight. Not from fear, from emotion that wasn't his own. He knelt slowly beside the dark water. The surface remained perfectly still, reflecting the glowing light above like a mirror. Then, very gently, Elias placed his hand against it. The reaction was immediate. Blue light burst through the water and spread across the entire chamber. Elias felt himself pulled forward as visions flooded his mind again. Only this time, they weren't fragmented. He saw everything clearly. The first underwater city, crowded streets filled with people who believed they had finally escaped the dying surface world. Families laughing, children growing up beneath the ocean, hope everywhere. And at the center of it all, Valen, not feared, loved. Elias saw the first people discovering the ancient creature deep beneath the ocean floor. At first, Valen barely understood them, but humanity connected itself to the creature little by little, sharing emotions and memories directly through the water surrounding it. For a while, the connection was beautiful. People no longer felt alone. They could feel one another's emotions completely. Grief was shared, joy was shared, love was shared, and Valen experienced human connection for the first time through them. But over the years, the connection kept growing stronger. Too strong. At first, people believed they had created a perfect world beneath the ocean. No one had to carry pain alone anymore. Every emotion could be shared through Valen. But over time, the boundaries between minds slowly started disappearing. People stopped knowing where their own thoughts ended and someone else's began, and Valen carried all of it. Elias felt the loneliness growing heavier inside the vision, not because Valen hated humanity, because it loved them too much. The creature absorbed every fear, every grief, every memory connected to it until the weight became unbearable. And when the first city finally realized what was happening, it was already too late. Panic spread through the city. Some people wanted to disconnect from Valen completely. Others refused, terrified of losing the connection that had made them feel understood for the first time in their lives. The city slowly turned against itself. And through all of it, Valen kept absorbing everything alone. Elias saw the final days of the first city unfold around him. Flooded streets, people crying, others willingly walking into the dark water to join themselves permanently to Valen, believing it was the only way to stop the suffering. But every new mind only made the creature's pain worse, until eventually, the entire city collapsed into silence. The vision shifted again. Elias now saw Valen alone beneath the ruins after the city disappeared. Still alive, still carrying the emotions and memories of thousands of people inside it. Centuries passed in darkness. Then, much later, the survivors who would eventually build Illyria arrived beneath the ocean and found the sleeping creature again. This time, humanity was more careful, or at least they believed they were. The people of Illyria used Valen for energy, but limited direct connection to it. fearing what had happened to the first city. But the connection never fully disappeared. Little by little, Violin still carried pieces of them. And little by little, the people above slowly lost pieces of themselves too. Elias could feel Vaylun's exhaustion now more clearly than ever. The creature had spent centuries trying to hold together the emotions, memories, and loneliness of entire civilizations completely alone. It never wanted to harm humanity. It simply never understood how to let go of them. And deep down, it was terrified of being alone again. Then Elias understood why Vaylin reacted to him. Unlike the people of Illyria, he arrived carrying emotions that felt strong, unfamiliar, and completely human to the creature. Curiosity, fear, wonder, connection. For the first time in generations, Vaylin felt someone truly see it instead of simply using it, and that connection woke it up. The vision slowly faded around him. Elias found himself kneeling beside the dark water again, breathing unevenly. But now he understood the truth. Vaylin wasn't trying to destroy Illyria. The creature was collapsing under the emotional weight of humanity itself. And if nothing changed, both Vaylin and the city above would eventually die together. A soft pulse moved through the water beneath Elias's hand. This time it felt almost fragile, like Vaylun was waiting for him to understand. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. Then quietly, without even knowing if the creature could truly hear words, he whispered, "You don't have to carry all of this alone anymore." Nothing happened. Then the entire chamber lit up with soft blue light, not violent, gentle. Elias suddenly felt emotions moving through the water around him again, but different this time, not endless grief. Relief, like something ancient had finally been understood after centuries of silence. The pressure inside Elias's mind slowly began easing, and for the first time since arriving beneath the ocean, Vaylun no longer felt distant. It felt tired, lonely, but also grateful. Then another feeling moved through the connection. Fear, not for itself, for Illyria. Elias understood now. Vaylun knew the city above depended on it completely. If the connection broke too suddenly, Illyria could collapse. The creature had kept carrying everything alone partly because it was afraid of what would happen to the people living above if it let go. Even now, it was still trying to protect them. A painful realization settled over Elias. The people of Illyria spent generations fearing Vaylun. Meanwhile, Vaylun spent those same centuries exhausting itself trying to keep humanity alive beneath the ocean. The creature was suffering because it refused to abandon them, even after everything humanity had done to it. Elias looked down into the glowing water. "There has to be another way," he whispered. A soft pulse moved through the chamber in response. Then suddenly, another vision appeared. Not from the past this time. A possibility. He saw the people of Illyria reconnecting with one another naturally instead of through Vaylun, sharing emotions themselves, living fully again. The vision shifted further. Illyria still stood beneath the ocean, but the city no longer depended completely on Vaylun's endless emotional burden. People were speaking openly, laughing, grieving together, remembering how to carry human emotion themselves instead of leaving it all to something else. And slowly, Vaylun's pain began easing too. The vision faded gently. Elias opened his eyes and finally understood what Vaylun wanted. Not worship, not sacrifice. Freedom. The creature didn't want to keep carrying humanity forever. It wanted humanity to learn how to carry itself again. A quiet warmth spread through the chamber after that. The water glowed softly around Elias's hand, almost reacting to the relief moving through him. Then he felt something else from Vaylun. Not fear, not pain, hope. Weak and fragile, but still there. And after centuries of carrying everything alone beneath the ocean, the creature finally felt understood by someone. Elias slowly pulled his hand away from the water. The chamber grew quiet again, but the heaviness that filled it before was gone. For the first time since arriving beneath the ocean, he understood what he needed to do. Illyria didn't need to destroy Vaylun. The city needed to stop depending on it for the parts of life humans were meant to carry themselves. When Elias stepped back outside into the ruins, Marcus was waiting near the entrance. The moment he saw Elias's face, he knew something had changed. "Well?" he asked carefully. Elias looked back toward the glowing chamber behind him. "Valen isn't trying to destroy the city," he said quietly. "It's exhausted." Marcus stayed silent for a moment. Then he slowly lowered his eyes, like part of him had already suspected that truth for years. Elias looked toward the ancient city around them. "The people of Illyria forgot how to carry emotion themselves," he continued. "Valen has been carrying it for them this whole time." The sadness on Marcus's face deepened. "And now it's collapsing under the weight of all of it," Elias said. Marcus quietly leaned against the stone wall beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The ruins around them no longer felt frightening, just tired, like the remains of people who once wanted the same things every human being wants: connection, safety, to not feel alone. Marcus finally looked toward Elias again. "So what happens now?" Elias thought about the vision Valen showed him. The city laughing again, people sharing emotions naturally instead of through the creature beneath them. Then he answered quietly, "Illyria has to remember how to be human again." Marcus let out a small breath, almost like a tired laugh. "Simple answer," he said. Then he looked upward toward the city far above the ruins. "The problem is convincing an entire civilization to change after centuries of fear." Elias knew he was right, but for the first time since arriving beneath the ocean, he also felt something else. Possibility. As they made their way back through the ancient ruins, the atmosphere around the city felt different now. The deep, violent tremors had stopped. The pulses moving through the walls felt calmer, almost lighter. It was subtle, but Elias could feel the change. Valen wasn't panicking anymore. When they finally returned to the chamber beneath Illyria, Ale was still there waiting. The moment she saw Elias, relief washed across her face so clearly that no words were needed. She immediately hurried toward him. Elias smiled tiredly. "I'm okay." Ale didn't understand the sentence itself, but she understood the smile. The creatures below the ruins were quieter now too. Some had returned deeper into the darkness beneath the city. Others simply watched silently from below, not threatening, just listening. Marcus stepped forward and explained everything to Ale as best he could in her language. Elias couldn't understand the words, but he could see the shock spreading across her face. At first, Ale looked toward the dark water below in disbelief. Then slowly, her expression changed. The fear she once carried toward Valen was fading. In its place was something much sadder: understanding. She finally realized the creature beneath Illyria had never been their enemy. One of the older creatures below the ruins looked toward Ale and spoke softly in their distorted voice. This time, instead of stepping away in fear, she listened. Really listened. And even though she could only understand fragments, tears slowly filled her eyes. Because the story they were telling was the same one Elias had already seen: loneliness, loss, and centuries of being forgotten. For a while, nobody in the chamber spoke. The silence felt different now, not tense, reflective, like everyone was slowly realizing how much suffering had grown beneath Illyria simply because people stopped trying to understand one another. Then Marcus finally looked toward the tunnel leading back to the city above. "We need to tell them the truth." Ael looked uncertain immediately. Elias understood why. The people of Illyria had feared the ruins below for generations. They believed the creatures down there were dangerous, and that Valen needed to remain controlled at all costs. Changing that belief wouldn't be easy, but hiding the truth clearly wasn't working anymore either. Marcus looked toward Elias. If the city keeps relying on Valen the same way it always has, nothing changes. Another soft pulse moved through the ruins beneath them. Weak, but steady. Elias looked toward the dark water one last time before turning back toward the tunnel above. Then quietly he said, "Let's go home." The journey back to Illyria felt different this time. The city no longer seemed mysterious or frightening to Elias. Now he could see the sadness hidden beneath its beauty. The glowing streets, the quiet people, the emotional distance everyone carried. It all made sense now. Illyria hadn't lost its humanity overnight. It slowly gave pieces of it away over generations. As they entered the upper levels of the city again, people immediately noticed them. Groups gathered quietly along the glowing pathways, whispering as Marcus and Ale walked beside Elias through Illyria. The tension spreading through the city was obvious. Everyone had felt the disturbances beneath the ocean, and everyone was waiting for answers. Marcus eventually stopped near the center of the city, beneath one of the enormous glowing structures stretching high above the canals. People slowly gathered around them from every direction. Some looked nervous, others confused. A few stared openly at Elias, the outsider who somehow became connected to the creature beneath their city. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from the soft currents moving through Illyria around them. Then Marcus stepped forward, and for the first time in years, he told the city the truth. Not about monsters beneath the ruins, not about curses, about fear, about loneliness, and about everything Illyria had chosen to forget. At first, many people reacted with disbelief. Others looked disturbed, just hearing the forgotten survivors beneath the city were still alive. But Marcus kept speaking. He told them about the first underwater civilization, about Valen carrying the emotional weight of humanity for centuries, and about how Illyria slowly lost pieces of itself by depending on the creature instead of each other. The crowd stayed silent after that, not because they didn't care, because deep down, many of them already recognized the truth in what Marcus was saying. They had all felt the emptiness growing inside Illyria for years, the distance between people, the fading emotions, the quiet loneliness nobody knew how to explain anymore. Then Elias stepped forward. At first, he wasn't even sure what to say. He looked around at the people gathered beneath the glowing lights of the city. Then he spoke honestly. "Valen isn't trying to hurt you," he said quietly. "It's been suffering alone for a very long time." The city remained completely silent around him. Elias looked toward the glowing streets stretching through Illyria. "You built this city together," he continued. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped sharing things with each other and left all of it to something beneath the ocean instead." A few people lowered their eyes after hearing that, because they knew he was right. "The people below the ruins aren't monsters either," Elias said. "They're what remains of the first city. People who were forgotten because everyone was too afraid to face what happened." A quiet sadness spread through the crowd. Some looked shaken, others looked ashamed. And for the first time in generations, Illyria truly began listening. Marcus stepped beside Elias again. "If Illyria keeps living the way it always has," he said, "Valen will eventually collapse." The words hit the crowd heavily, because everyone understood what that meant. Without Valen, the city beneath the ocean could not survive the same way it always had. Fear immediately spread through parts of the crowd. Elias noticed it right away. People were afraid of losing the only way of life they had ever known. So he spoke again before panic could spread further. "Valen doesn't want to abandon you," he said. "It just can't carry all of this alone anymore." The city grew quiet once more. Then somewhere in the crowd, someone started crying softly. The sound seemed to affect everyone around them, because in Illyria, open emotion had become so rare that even simple tears felt unfamiliar now. A woman nearby gently reached for the crying person's hand. Then someone else stepped closer too. Small gestures, human gestures. And slowly, something inside the city began changing. People started speaking openly to one another, quietly at first, then more honestly. Fears they had buried for years slowly surfaced beneath the glowing lights of the city. Grief, loneliness, regret, not hidden anymore, shared. And deep beneath Illyria, Valen's soft pulses through the city grew calmer with every passing moment. Ale stood beside Elias, watching it all happen. The city around them still looked the same on the outside. But emotionally, something had shifted. For the first time in generations, people in Illyria were no longer quietly carrying everything alone. They were reaching for each other again. Over the days that followed, Illyria slowly began changing. Not through some sudden miracle, through people. Families started gathering together more often. Conversations lasted longer. Music returned to parts of the city that had been silent for years. And little by little, the emotional emptiness hanging over Illyria began fading. The forgotten survivors beneath the ruins were no longer hidden either. At first, people were terrified of them, but fear slowly turned into grief once the city understood who they really were. They weren't monsters. They were the remains of people who had suffered alone beneath the ocean for centuries. Some people from Illyria eventually began visiting the ruins below, not to study them, to listen, to remember them. And for the first time in a very long while, the survivors beneath the city were no longer completely alone in the darkness. Even Valen's presence beneath the ocean felt different now, quieter, lighter. One evening, Elias stood beside the outer edge of Illyria with Aiel, watching the dark ocean stretch endlessly beyond the glowing walls of the city. The currents moved softly through the water around them. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Aiel looked toward him and asked carefully, in broken but improving words, "You stay?" Elias smiled a little. Months ago, the question would have terrified him. Now the answer felt simple. He looked back toward the city behind them, the glowing streets, the people reconnecting with one another, the life slowly returning to Illyria. Then he looked at Aiel again. "Yes," he said quietly, "I stay." Aiel's expression softened immediately. She didn't fully understand every word yet, but she understood enough. They simply stood there together beneath the blue glow surrounding the city, and for the first time since Elias arrived beneath the ocean, the future no longer felt frightening. Far below them, a soft pulse moved through Illyria one more time. Valen. But now the feeling carried through the city was different. No fear, no desperation, just quiet peace. Almost like the creature beneath the ocean was finally resting after centuries of carrying the weight of humanity alone. The people of Illyria still had a long way to go. Healing a civilization takes time. There were still fears to overcome, truths to face, and wounds left behind by generations of silence. But now, for the first time in centuries, they were facing those things together instead of alone, and that changed everything. Some nights, Elias still visited the ancient ruins beneath the city, not because he feared them anymore, because he wanted to remember. The forgotten survivors slowly began recovering pieces of themselves too as Illyria reconnected with them, and each time Elias stood near the dark water beneath the ruins, he could still feel Valen there, calm, quiet, no longer suffering alone. Over time, laughter returned fully to Illyria, real laughter, not rare or uncomfortable anymore. Children filled the glowing pathways of the city again while people gathered beside the canals simply to talk, share stories, and enjoy one another's presence. Small moments. But those small moments were exactly what the city had been missing for generations. And slowly the people of Illyria stopped seeing emotion as something dangerous. They began understanding it for what it truly was. A reminder that no one is meant to carry life completely alone. Even grief became easier when shared with others. And beneath the endless ocean, humanity slowly found itself again.
Years later, Elias would sometimes stand near the highest terraces of Illyria and look out through the dark ocean beyond the city. The hidden world beneath the sea still felt beautiful, but now it also felt alive in a way it never had before, not because the city became perfect, because the people inside it finally allowed themselves to truly feel, connect, and live again. And deep beneath the glowing city, Valen still rested beneath the ocean floor. Ancient, massive, beyond human understanding, but no longer alone. The people of Illyria no longer treated the creature as a distant source of power beneath the sea. They remembered it as something that suffered beside them for centuries, something that needed compassion too. Sometimes Elias and Aiel would return to the surface together just to watch the night sky above the ocean. The first time Elias arrived beneath the sea, he thought the hidden city was the greatest discovery of his life. But in the end, the most important thing he found there wasn't a lost civilization. It was connection. And beneath the quiet glow of the hidden city under the sea,
People slowly continued rebuilding the parts of themselves they had lost over generations. Not perfectly, not all at once, but together. And somewhere deep below them, Vaylun rested peacefully beneath the ocean, no longer carrying the weight of humanity completely alone. For the first time in centuries, both the city and the creature beneath it could finally breathe. Years later, stories about the hidden city beneath the ocean would still never reach the surface world. Illyria remained hidden in the depths, protected by the endless sea around it. But inside the city, life continued changing. People laughed more easily, families stayed closer, and children grew up hearing the truth about the ruins below instead of learning to fear them. The silence that once defined Illyria slowly became nothing more than memory. And every now and then, when the city grew quiet at night, Elias would still feel the soft pulses of Vaylun moving beneath the ocean floor, not calling for help anymore. Just there, peaceful, like the deep, steady heartbeat of the world beneath the sea. And somehow, knowing it was still there no longer felt frightening. It felt comforting. One evening, while standing beside the glowing canals with Al, Elias watched groups of children running through the city laughing without fear. Al noticed him smiling and quietly asked what he was thinking about. Elias looked around at Illyria for a moment before answering. When I first came here, this place felt beautiful because it was hidden from the world. He smiled softly. Now it feels beautiful because people finally feel alive again. El leaned gently against him, while the blue light from the city reflected softly across the water around them. Neither of them spoke after that. They didn't need to. The sounds of people talking, laughing, and simply living around them said enough on their own. And beneath the endless ocean, hidden far away from the rest of the world, humanity quietly found its way back to itself. Far above the ocean, the stars still shined across the night sky, unseen by most of the people living below. But Illyria no longer felt cut off from that world anymore. The city had finally remembered something important. Being human was never about escaping fear, grief, or loneliness completely. It was about facing those things together instead of alone. And maybe that was enough. Enough for hope. Enough for healing. Enough for people beneath the ocean to keep moving forward together, one day at a time. As the glowing city slowly settled into peaceful quietness beneath the sea, Elias looked out across Illyria one last time. Then, somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed softly through the streets, and he smiled. And somewhere beneath the endless ocean, hidden far away from the noise of the surface world, the glowing city of Illyria continued quietly breathing through the darkness. The people there were still healing, still learning, still finding one another again. And maybe that was enough. So tonight, wherever you are in the world, beneath your own ceiling of stars, I hope you remember that no one is meant to carry life alone. Sleep well, and good night.